Um, Good evening. Welcome, everybody. It's my pleasure to welcome you here to our newest Voices of Faith discussion. It's brought to you by the Northwest Tucson Multi-Faith Fellowship group. Today, we're gathered for a multi-faith discussion about creation. No matter what your faith tradition, you probably have some kind of belief on how this world began and what constitutes creation. Throughout this discussion tonight, we'll explore this topic from several different spiritual traditions, and our speakers will share their insight into the subject, and we encourage you to listen with an open mind and heart. It's our hope that by the end of the discussion, you will have learned something new and will have discovered that perhaps you share some similarities with faith traditions beyond your own. I'm Natalie Giddens. I'm Communication Director for the Tucson North Stake of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I also have the pleasure of being the Secretary for this Northwest Tucson Multi-Faith Fellowship, and it is a pleasure. And I will be moderating tonight's discussion, and I've asked Reverend John, hold on, Angulo to give us our opening prayer.
Thank you, Natalie.
I don't think I said your name right.
No, you said it perfectly. So my friends, I invite you to join me in an attitude of prayer right now. Holy God, we thank you so much for this opportunity to gather together in this circle of friendship and understanding, seeking knowledge and wisdom, not only from each other, but from your divine wisdom too. May we speak confidently representing our beliefs and the beliefs of our communities if we have a group belief system. May we further and foster understanding and compassion and love. And may we do this all in a spirit of united humanity and, of course, the love of your creation. And I pray this in all of your holy names. Amen.
Thank you. Hold on, I'm trying to. We will first hear tonight. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. Before we get started, again, I'd like to thank those faith leaders who will be sharing their thoughts tonight and for taking the time to be with us and to prepare some remarks. Each individual will take 3 to 5 minutes, and we encourage those who are viewing or listening to participate by asking questions or putting comments in the chat box. And that is, if you're looking at your screen, it's down on the lower right. First up, we're going to hear from Nelufar Mohajeri she's representing the Baha'i community of Oro Valley.
Thank you so much, Natalie. It's a pleasure to be with you all as a former resident of the Tucson area. So it's nice to see my former neighbors. How's that? I currently live in Bellingham, Washington, up north, so not so close to Tucson anymore. I wanted to just give you a little background about myself so that it can put into context how I came to some of these understandings. My undergraduate degree is in genetic engineering from the University of Virginia. My graduate degrees are in international affairs from George Washington University and international human rights law from Oxford University. And it really kind of brings together those fields of study, this balance between religious belief, my heart, and scientific and analytical thinking, my head, that really have to be balanced in order to understand any question in the world around us. I truly believe there is no dichotomy between this analytical, scientific portion of me and the spiritual heart part that is led by God and by the Spirit. So I'm going to share a short presentation, and I tend to talk very fast. So if I'm going too fast, please stop me and let me know. What I wanted to first share is that this idea of creation really is related to the harmony of science and religion. And we've had faith leaders, some of whom are quoted on this first slide, talking about science and religion being together harmoniously. But what I want to go is this first quotation from the Baha'i scripture, where the founder of the Baha'i faith talks about how God loved creating humanity. I love thy creation, hence I created thee. Our being was an act of love. As Baha'is, we believe that this is the foundation of our understanding of creation. Now, especially the book of Genesis. But according to the Baha'i teachings, God is the maker, the creator, and nature and all created things are the embodiments of his will. So, for example, Baha'u'llah says that nature in its essence is the embodiment of my name, the maker, the creator. Nature is God's will and is its expression in and through the contingent world. It is endowed with a power whose reality men of learning fail to grasp. Indeed, a man of insight can perceive naught therein save the effulgent splendor of our name, the creator. So according to our teachings, nature is entirely subject to the rule and control of natural law. And these natural laws provide a complete order and a finished design from which nature can never depart. In other words, all created things were created perfect and complete from the first. But this perfection is not manifest in the beginning, but only appears by degrees. And I think this is where the reality of science and religion really come together, is in that degrees. So, for example, we have this quotation from the son of Baha'u'llah, where he talks about the terrestrial globe. This really puts that scientific findings that we look at in terms of evolution and the creation of the world and humanity and all of these creatures into a progressive stance. So Abdu'l-Baha, the son of Baha'u'llah, was asked this question, and he responded that the terrestrial globe from the beginning was created with all its elements, substances, minerals, atoms, and organisms. But these only appeared by degrees. First the mineral, then the plant, afterward the animal, and finally man. But from the first, these kinds of species existed, but were undeveloped in the terrestrial globe and then appeared only gradually. For the supreme organization of God and the universal natural system surround all beings, and all are subject to this rule. When you consider the universal system, you see that there's not one of the beings which at its coming into existence had reached the limit of perfection. No, they gradually grow and develop and then attain the degree of perfection. So this process of development, often in the Baha'i teachings, is compared to the growth of an embryo into the process of growth from a seed into a tree. So human beings, the creation of human beings, we believe did not happen all at once, but developed through degrees and stages. And humanity may have looked different at different stages. So in the world of existence, man has traversed successive degrees until he has attained the human kingdom. In each degree of his progression, he has developed capacity for advancement to the next station and condition. While in the kingdom of mineral, he was attaining the capacity for promotion into the degree of the vegetable. In the kingdom of vegetable, he underwent preparation for the world of the animal. And from thence, he has come onward to the human degree or kingdom. Throughout this journey of progression, he has ever and always been potentially man. So that potential of being that human has been there throughout the history of the development of the world. It's just at those different stages of development, humanity may have looked different. So one of the quotations from Abdu'l-Baha that I love around this particular reality is, man is endowed with an outer physical reality. It belongs to the material realm and the animal kingdom because it has sprung from the material world. This animalistic reality of man he shares in common with the animals. The human body is like the animal, subject to nature's laws. But here's the cool religious piece of it. But man is endowed with a second reality, the rational or intellectual reality. The intellectual reality of man predominates over nature. Yet there's a third reality, the spiritual reality, which is it's amazing when you think about that dynamic being brought into this. Again, the harmony of science and religion. And Abdu'l-Baha explains the deep symbolism that as Baha'is we believe from other faith traditions of the creation story. So he says that Adam signifies the heavenly spirit of Adam and Eve, his human soul. For in some passages in the holy books where women are mentioned, they represent the soul of man. The tree of good and evil signifies the human world, for the spiritual and divine world is purely good and absolutely luminous. But in the human world, light and darkness, good and evil existed as opposite conditions. The meaning of the serpent is attachment to the human world. This attachment of the spirit to the human world led the soul and the spirit of Adam from the world of freedom to the world of bondage and caused him to turn from the kingdom of unity to the human world. When the soul and spirit of Adam entered the human world, he came out from the paradise of freedom and fell into the world of bondage. From the height of purity and absolute goodness, he entered into the world of good and evil. And I'm sure some of other wonderful speakers will expand on the creation stories. But really, I just wanted to touch on this idea of religion and science that have clashed. And often scientists that I work with, I am with the International Society for Optics and Photonics, like I hear the scientists speaking very dismissively of religious belief. And I've had religious people who have really criticized. I'm sorry? I thought I heard somebody. But what I believe is that this has to stop because true science and true religion agree. The creation story, really, when you look at the implications of it, there are relationships that are being described just in a way that people have needed explained to them to put into context at the time that these were being taught by our amazing religious founders like Jesus Christ, His Holiness Muhammad, the great Moses, Buddha, all of these wonderful teachers. And so as Baha'is, we try to really bring the truth of science and align it in harmony with religious beliefs. And so I am not going to get too much into the science and religion piece, except to end maybe with this quote, that science without religion is lame and religion without science is blind, as the great Albert Einstein said. But really, the creation story to me is a wonderful example of how science and religion can really bring two wonderful perspectives about how we human beings came about into one beautiful, cohesive story. Sorry, I spoke very fast. So,
Nelufar, thank you so much for your thoughts. That was fascinating. I appreciate that.
thank you.
Rabbi Sam, we were going to have you go next, but I know that you are sensitive to sunset. Would it be better for you to go now or to go later?
No, now is fine.
Okay, we'll turn the time over to Rabbi Sam Cohen from the congregation Beit Simcha.
Beit Simcha, but thank you. That's great.
You know I can't do that.
We'll get you there, I promise. Welcome. Thank you, folks. Thank you for that beautiful presentation. I want to note, Elifar, that it's wonderful to hear so much Judaism quoted in your teachings. When we look at creation, we really are forced to begin with the book of Genesis, Breshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz. If I screen share, will that show up okay? I'm just curious. Can you all
Yes,
see
it should.
that? Okay, so this is the text that we begin the Torah with, what Christians call the Old Testament. It's the foundational text of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Baha'i, so many, really all Western religion. And when you look at that text, it's really interesting because although I'll end up wandering, I promise, into science and religion, somehow when you talk about creation, it's kind of hard not to do that. It starts, Breshit bara Elohim et hashamayim v'et haaretz v'aretz hayta tohu vavohu v'choshech al pnei tehom v'ruach Elohim rachefet al pnei hamayim. I'm sure you guys all know that text, but you'll note that the translation you're looking at, when God began to create heaven and earth, the earth unformed and void, or the earth chaotic, darkness over the surface of the deep, a wind from God, Ruach Elohim, the Spirit of God, hovering over the face of the water, sweeping, is this translation. God said, Yehi or, let there be light, and there was light, right? Maybe the most famous passage in all Scripture of any kind, at least in the West. I want to note a really important teaching in this text. The first two words of the Hebrew Bible are Breshit bara, the beginning of, and then the word bara, which is created. In English, it doesn't show up like this, but in the Hebrew, it's clear that there's a grammatical error. What's the error? The word Breshit means at the beginning of, and it must be followed by a noun. That's just the way Hebrew grammar works. It's worked since biblical times in this way. Hebrew is a very ancient language. We know how it works. And it doesn't work because the next word, bara, is a verb. And that means that it starts Breshit, at the beginning of, bara Elohim, created God. And that sort of makes sense in English, but it doesn't make sense in Hebrew. And we've known that for a very long time. And the oldest Torah commentators try to fill in the gaps because there's a noun missing. And they have all kinds of ways of filling this in at the beginning of creation, at the beginning of time, at the beginning of God's creation of the universe, at the beginning of everything. There's lots of different explanations, and they date back literally thousands of years. But the one thing we can definitely say is you can't possibly understand this text without the interpretations of all the people who've come before you, and without interpreting it and putting yourself into the text. So the very initiating moment of the creation of the foundational text of all Western religion, in fact, of all Western civilization, is based in a grammatical error that requires interpretation. That means there's no such thing as a literal understanding of the Bible, because the first two words don't agree, right? You can't understand them if you don't have that capacity to insert yourself into this process of creation. That means for all of the beautiful aspects of creation, the one thing we know is that creation is going to be a shared process between God and humanity. We can't even understand this revealed text. And by the way, tonight is the Jewish holiday of Shavuot, when the 10 Commandments were supposed to have been revealed to Moses at Sinai, and not just Moses, but the whole people of Israel. It belongs to all of us. And that experience of everybody being part of that, everyone must insert themselves into this text to understand what it means. Well, that tells you that God's creation is not a static thing that happened once, but an ongoing process in which we are partners. So, I mean, I could go on with all of the scientific questions of evolution and the rest of it, and I think that it's valuable and meaningful and powerful. But I do think it's extremely important to understand our importance in this process. It's not top down, it's shared, and it's shared with God. I'm going to jump a little bit because I know we have kind of limited time for each of these presentations. I love Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism. And since we're kind of on the theme of science and religion, I'm going to, because creation kind of obligates us to do that in so many ways, I'm going to read a passage from one of my teachers, Danny Matt, who was the wonderful professor for many years at Union Theological Seminary in the Bay Area. And his translation of the Zohar, the greatest work of Jewish mysticism, a 700-year-old text that's now become fresh again because of his abilities. But he wrote a book called God and the Big Bang. And I'm just going to read a little bit of the opening of that. It's not very long, but it's a passage that explains sort of how he harmonizes this creation epic from Genesis, this ancient text, with our scientific understanding. In the beginning was the Big Bang, 15 billion years ago. The primordial vacuum was devoid of matter, but not really empty. Rather, it was in a state of minimum energy, pregnant with potential, teeming with virtual particles. For a quantum fluctuation, a sort of bubble in this vacuum, there emerged a hot, dense seed, smaller than a proton, containing all the mass and energy of our universe. In less than a trillionth of a second, this seed cooled and expanded wildly, faster than the speed of light, inflating to the size of a grapefruit. During this inflation, the potential mass and energy could not yet manifest as particles. Space was expanding too fast for any particles to congeal out of the vacuum. But as the expansion slowed down, energy latent in the vacuum precipitated as particles and antiparticles. These annihilated each other, except for 1 in a billion particles, which survived to become the building blocks of matter. The annihilation gave birth to a flood of energy, generating the radiation of the Big Bang. The ball of the universe continued expanding and has never stopped. He continues describing sort of the way that all of this expansion begins, and then he concludes in the last part, matter and radiation decoupled, the universe turned transparent. This is the moment of Yehi Or, let there be light. I think that part of our covenantal relationship with God is to understand creation in different ways in every generation, and to be part of not only understanding it, but making it relevant for everyone so that we can see ourselves in this amazing creation that began with this moment of singularity, this phenomenal expansion of divine energy into the universe. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. We appreciate you making time for us today. I know this is a special day for your faith, so thank you. Okay. Bear with me, everyone. I'm trying to get us to our next person. Here we go. Next, we're thrilled to hear from Reverend John Angulo from the Casas Adobes Congregational United Church of Christ.
Thank you. Thank you, Natalie, and thank you, everybody, for joining us on this important discussion tonight. So, as I do in all of our conversations like this, I have to make a statement about my tradition and I'm not going to read from our Constitution again, because I think you got the general, for those of you who've seen me before, have gotten the general gist of what it is. But what we are is we are in covenant with each other in our community, and we are in covenant with God. And part of this covenant is having the freedom and the ability to form our relationship with God in a way that is beneficial and life-giving to us. So when I speak, I do not speak for our denomination or even for my church. I speak for myself and my relationship with God and my relationship with the community, because everybody else is free to speak in their covenant with God and their understanding of God and community. So with that said, God is a creative force. God works for the good. At the beginning of Genesis, which we're going to be hearing a lot about the book of Genesis, it starts out with God hovering over the darkness of the waters of chaos. And in this chaos, God speaks the words that bring forth light and separate light from darkness. So this idea of chaos and the creative energy that is used to kind of bring chaos into some sort of order is where I find God at God's best, because God continually is creating. Now, as that story goes on, God continues to speak, and as creation is drawn out of this disorder, God ends each passage, each day, with, and it was good. And so there's a goodness in creation. And it finally culminates with God creating humankind and creating humankind in God's image. Now, in the second story of creation, that's in Genesis 2, we get a more intimate view of God creating humanity through the very breath of God and the dirt of the earth. And in that story, we get a really strong connection of the natural world in the dirt and the divinity, the spirit of the divine coming out of God and being breathed into this earth. So there is a union there that cannot be pulled apart. Just like science and religion cannot be pulled apart. And for many years, they were considered the same thing up until recent modern history have they started being pulled apart. But it's a quest to understand what our relationship is with the natural world and what our relationship is with the larger world, the larger universe, with divinity or spirituality. I firmly agree that we are beings made of intellect, spirit, and body. And so it's all that balancing back and forth as to what makes us whole people in our understanding. So science, the place of science is to help us connect with God. Because as God never stopped creation, our inquiry into that creation never ends either. So God is constantly being revealed, and we are constantly discovering. And so as these beings of breath and dirt are brought into the garden and formed out into others via sinew and bone, they're given care of the garden. They're given care of creation. We are caretakers of creation. And so, in my opinion, science is part of that caretaking of God's creation. And we are almost commanded in my theology to continue seeking God in every way possible, to be good caretakers, to be those images of God that were created to do good and to bring light into the world and to help bring some sort of meaning and order to the world and not chaos. And so in the theology of what we kind of covered the last time about the fall, a lot of my theology around that is there is a responsibility when we start making bad choices. And when we start making bad choices, our part in creation is damaged and we need to set it right. And as a Christian, I believe that Christ came to help us set things right in the world and to show us the way of selflessness. Not to steal a little bit of Father Miguel's thunder, but my theology also really resonates around the theology of St. Francis of Assisi, who really saw the entire natural world as a manifestation of God and would often praise the different animals and the different natural parts of the world as manifestations of God, as he did in the Canticle of the Sun, where he put different parts of God to the natural world. So that is where creation goes. I embrace science 100%. It is a religious endeavor, and I embrace religion 100%. There are parts of scientific inquiry that I think are important to my faith too. In my tradition, we have a saying, and it's taken from the comedian Gracie Allen, and it says, "Never put a period where God has placed a comma. God is still speaking." And that's where all of this fits in science and creation.
John, thank you so much. I love that quote. Thank you. That was awesome. Next, we are thrilled to hear from Hussein Sen from SEMA Foundation. Let me get you in the spotlight position. There you go.
Hello everyone, I'm going to share my screen for the presentation. Okay, so can you see the screen? In this presentation, I will use Quranic verses, and it was really hard to focus on which part of the creation. So this is what I could find. I think it will be better. So let's start. The main topics of the presentation will be the Big Bang, 6 days, expansion of the universe, life came from water, and the creation of Adam and Eve. The Quran says that the heavens and the earth were joined together as one unit before we clawed them asunder. Following this big explosion, Allah turned to the sky, and it had been as smoke. He said to it and to the earth, "Come together willingly or unwillingly." They said, "We come together in willing obedience." Thus the elements and what was to become the planets and stars began to cool, come together, and form into shape, following the natural laws that Allah established in the universe. The 6 days, it's a little bit different than Christianity, and at least some part of Christianity. The Quran states that Allah created the heavens and the earth and all that is between them in 6 days. While on the surface this might seem similar to the account related in the Bible, there are some important distinctions. The verses that mention 6 days use Arabic word yawm. The word appears several other times in the Quran, each denoting a different measurement of time. In one case, it is 50,000 years. In another, it's 1,000 years of our reckoning. The word yawm is thus understood within the Quran to be a long period of time. Therefore, Muslims interpret the description of a 6 days creation as 6 distinct periods. The length of these periods is not precisely defined, nor are the specific developments that took place during each period. After completing the creation, the Quran describes that Allah settled himself upon the throne to oversee his work. A distinct point is made to counter the biblical idea of a day of rest. We created the heavens and the earth and all that is between them in 6 days, nor did any sense of weariness touch us. Allah is never done with his work because the process of creation is ongoing. Each new child who is born, every seed that sprouts into sapling, every new species that appears on earth is part of ongoing process of Allah's creation. It is who created the heavens and the earth in 6 days, then established himself on the throne. He knows what enters within the heart of the earth and what comes forth out of it, what comes down from heaven and what mounts up to it. And he is with you wherever you may be, and Allah sees well all that you do. The Quranic account of creation is in line with the modern scientific thought about the development of the universe and life on earth. Muslims acknowledge that life developed over a long period of time, but see Allah's power behind it all. Description of creation in the Quran are set in context to remind the readers of Allah's majesty and wisdom. What is the matter with you that you are not conscious of Allah's majesty, seeing that it is He who has created you in diverse stages? See you not how Allah has created the 7 heavens one above another, and made the moon a light in their midst, and made the sun as a glorious lamp. And Allah has produced you from the earth, growing gradually. Life came from water. The Quran describes that Allah made from water every living thing. Another verse describes how Allah has created every animal from water. One of them are some that creep on their bellies, some that walk on 2 legs, and some that walk on 4. Allah creates what He wills, for truly Allah has power over all things. These verses support the scientific theory that life began in the earth's oceans and the creation of Adam and Eve. While Islam recognizes the general idea of the development of life in stages over a period of time, human beings are considered as a special act of creation. Islam teaches that human beings are a unique life form that was created by Allah in a special way, with unique gifts and abilities unlike any other, a soul and conscious, knowledge, and free will. In short, Muslims do not believe that human beings randomly evolved from apes. The life of human beings began with the creation of 2 people, a male and a female, named Adam and Hawa in Arabic word. The Quran describes how Allah created Adam. We created man from sounding clay, from mud molded into shape. And he began the creation of man from clay and made his progeny from a quintessence of fluid. Thus, human beings have fundamental attachment to the earth. While the creation of Eve is not described in detail, the Quran does make it clear that a mate was created with Adam from the same nature and soul. It is he who created you from a single person and made his mate of like nature in order that he might dwell with her in love. She is not mentioned by name in the Quran, but in Islamic tradition, she is known as Hawa. From these two individuals, generations of human beings have inhabited the earth. O humankind, we created you from a single pair of a male and a female and made you into nations and tribes, so that you may know each other, not that you may despise each other. Verily, the most honored among you in the sight of Allah is who is the most righteous of you. And Allah has full knowledge and is well acquainted with all things. And here is another passage. Verily in the heavens and the earth are signs for those who believe, and in the creation of yourselves, and the fact that animals are scattered through the earth, are signs for those of assured faith, and in the alternation of night and day, and that fact that Allah sends down sustenance from the sky and revives therewith the earth after its death, and in the change of winds are signs for those who are wise. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hussein. Very interesting. I hope everyone is enjoying this as much as I am. We are now going to hear from Father Miguel Mariano from St. Odelia Catholic Community.
Oh, good evening, everyone. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all to this evening's chat, if you will. I just would like to give credit to where it belongs. The ideas and some quotations will be coming from our Catechism of the Catholic Church. So the book of Genesis begins with these solemn words and declaration, quote, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Hence, in our profession of faith, the Apostles' Creed, we Catholics confess that God the Father Almighty is the creator of heaven and earth, of all that is seen and unseen. Creation is the foundation of all God's saving plans, the beginning of the history of salvation that culminates in Christ. This beginning statement from Genesis affirms three things. The eternal God gave a beginning to all that exists outside of himself, that he alone is creator, and that the totality of what exists depends on the one who gives it being. Now, why did he create us and his creation? Scripture and tradition never cease to teach and celebrate the fundamental truth that the world was made for the glory of God. Saint Bonaventure explains that God created all things not to increase his glory, but to show it forth and to communicate it, for God has no other reason for creating than his love and his goodness. Creatures came into existence when the key of love opened his hand. God made us to be his children through Christ, according to the purpose of his will, to the praise of his glorious grace, for the glory of God is humans fully alive. The ultimate purpose of creation is that God, who is the creator of all things, may at last become all in all, thus simultaneously assuring his own glory and our beatitude. We believe that God created the world according to his wisdom. It is not the product of any necessity whatever, nor of blind faith or chances. We believe that it proceeds from God's free will, For he wanted to make his creatures share in his being, in his wisdom, and in his goodness. We believe that God needs no pre-existent thing or any help in order to create, nor is creation any sort of necessary emanation from the divine substance. God creates freely out of nothing. God has entrusted us with the dominion over his creation, not an absolute power or a freedom to use or misuse or to dispose of things as one pleases. The limitation imposed from the beginning by the Creator himself and expressed symbolically by the prohibition not to eat of the fruit of the tree shows clearly enough that when it comes to the natural world, we are subject not only to the biological laws, but also to the moral ones, which cannot be violated by impunity. The creation of God, our environment, is God's gift to everyone, and in our use of it, we have the responsibility towards the poor, towards humanity as a whole. We have our duties towards the environment, and it is because it is directly linked to our duties towards the human person. I just would like to make one quick statement that this week, the Catholic Church, through the writings of Pope Francis, Laudato Si, we are celebrating the 8th-year anniversary of that document. And in that document, Laudato Si, it is the first encyclical to focus on the environment, on God's creation. So this week, he is inviting all of us to really be aware, to be cognizant of the fact that we all have the responsibility to care for our creation. And in so doing, this is not just the work of one church, but it is the work of the entire humanity to care for the world, for his creation, so that this creation can continually serve humanity and for the needs of God's people. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Father Miguel. We appreciate your thoughts. Our last, oh, hold on. I gotta get this right. Place. There we go. Our last presenter is going to be President Steve Broadbent from the Tucson North Stake of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Thank you, Natalie, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. This is our third episode of Voices of Faith. For those of you that may have missed our previous versions on life after death and forgiveness and repentance, these events are recorded and put on our YouTube channel under Tucson Northwest Multi-Faith Fellowship. You can do a search on that and find those. I would like to start my discussion about the creation before the creation. It is the belief of our faith that all of us that have lived on the earth or ever lived or will live on the earth at one point lived with our Father in heaven as his literal spiritual children, that we were spiritually begotten of him. And in heaven, before the earth was created, there was a great council, a grand council, where God presented his plan for his children, where they could learn and grow and progress and obtain a physical body and to be tested to see if they would be worthy of a far greater blessings. His plan was for us to become more like him. And we shouted for joy when we heard the plan at the opportunity that it presented us. As recorded in the book of Job in the Old Testament, God asked Job, "Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who laid the cornerstone thereof, when all the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy?" Under the direction of the Father, Jesus Christ formed and organized this world out of existing eternal matter that was without form and void, We believe that he has created many such worlds. He divided the light from the darkness. He formed the sun, the moon, and the stars. He divided the waters from the dry land to make seas and rivers and lakes. He made the earth to bring forth grass and trees and flowers and other plants of all kinds. These plants contained seeds from which new plants could grow. Then he caused the earth to bring forth the animals, fish, cattle, insects, and birds of all kinds. These animals also had the ability to reproduce their own kind. Finally came the greatest creation of all, mankind. Our spirits would have the ability to inhabit mortal bodies of flesh and blood, where they could live on the earth. Man is composed of an eternal spirit, which was created by God and lived with him before the world, and a tabernacle of clay that we receive at birth. As we read in Genesis, and God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. And the Lord God formed man of the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. We believe that we are literally formed in the image of God, that we are his children. And we look like him, except that he is glorified and perfected and immortal and eternal and greater glory than we are. This process of creation, as Hussein shared with us, took place over a period that was divided into 6 different periods that were termed days, but were not literal 24-hour periods of time as we count a day today. These were indeterminate, lengthy periods of time. And on the 7th day, in quotes, he was pleased and he knew that his work was good and he rested for a time. Quote, "And God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made," end quote. As was discussed by several others before me, in the mind of some there is a conflict between science and religion. However, sometimes science gets it wrong, and new understanding and new knowledge is added to and modified what was previously believed. In addition, our God reveals truth sometimes in symbols and parables, which are on occasion misinterpreted or misunderstood. But in the end, all truth can be circumscribed into one great whole, and that religion and science will agree completely. And this is all of my comments for tonight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Broadbent. And thank you to everyone who participated tonight, either by presenting information or by simply coming to our chat and listening and watching. We appreciate you. If you would like to contact any of the speakers whose thoughts resonated with you, or if you have further questions, I'll include the speakers' email addresses in the chat box. And then, like President Broadbent said, I will make sure that this video gets posted on the group's YouTube channel. I did include a link to that over in the chat box. It's the Northwest Tucson Multi-Faith Fellowship YouTube channel. And we look forward to seeing you guys next time. Thank you so much.